There are three key historic pinpoints we will discuss in this video. The intent is to empower you with the history of Lyman so that you as a citizen can know how to move it forward while honoring the good points of our past. The Lyman pre-mill, the Lyman mill time, and the Lyman post-mill. Every piece of history has key components that has a lasting impact. Yet the entire story can be so much more profound when seen in the full context. And I would encourage everyone who is going through this course to get into the depths of it. Not just to have knowledge, but to truly apply the concepts stated by the writer and philosopher George Santayana. And in its original form, it reads, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Although condemned gives a very powerful negative connotation, and in context, it was said in that powerful negative connotation, the fact is that it renders the same for both positive effects of history as it does the negative effects of history. Let's go into the history of Lyman pre-mill. The first families settling in Lyman were the Woods, Wingos, Princes, and Ballingers. The Gross family had its beginning in this area, and in the 1870s, in 1876, the Southern Railroad was built through Welford, which included what is now known as Lyman and Duncan. Before being known as Lyman, it was called Gross's Stop, named after August Belton Gross. His position and the like became more visible when he established a general store, which was the place to stop when traveling from Greenville to Spartanburg, like many of us do today. A.B. Gross developed an alternator that would power the homes and give electricity to them. Being a pioneer ahead of his time, when there was no electricity, Mr. Gross's alternator provided electricity to all the family houses. And the person who ran the electricity for him would shut down the alternator at 10 p.m. 10 minutes prior, he would flash the lights to let everyone know, lights out in 10 minutes. A.B. Gross became a business pioneer when that alternator became NRE Power Company, which was then later sold to Duke Power. The NRE Power Company also owned part of the railroad that came through the area. So now let's jump to the mill, Lyman mill time. At the time, A.B. Gross and his family were living their life and hosting many travelers to and fro. There was a mill company in Boston, Massachusetts that was operating in all cylinders. It was just going strong and needing to expand. Incorporated in Latham, Massachusetts in 1853, with $1 million, the Pacific Mill was churning away. By 1895, just more than 42 years later, they had more than 200,000 spindles working to create fabric. In the early 1900s, Gross's Stop began to attract outsiders as the potential and location became a key attraction to them. In 1920, the Pacific Mills began to look around for a location that can help them strategically. Being in Boston had its perks, but they realized that expansion would be key to their growth. As well, unionization in the northern states was not helping the textile industry too much. In 1920, the executive team of the Pacific Mills brought 750 acres for approximately $6 million from, you guessed it, Mr. A.B. Gross. The attraction would be that the town would be built around the mill. The mill town would break from the normal salt box type homes being built, and they will also implement plumbing into every mill home. What we know as Ridge Road was reserved for the executive team and their families. The mill was built in 1924 and subsequently the town. They built 375 houses, a 12-room school, a community building which later played host to the President Jimmy Carter, and they also converted some existing buildings to suit their use. Their goal was a centrally located mill facility that could shorten the shipping time from Boston to everywhere else. In 1924, upon opening, production reached 1 million yards a week. 30 years later, Pacific Mills sold the Lyman plant to Burlington Industries. It was at this juncture of the history of Lyman that the residents voted to incorporate the town and honor the former president of Pacific Mills, Arthur Lyman, by naming the town after his surname. The decision took the small farming community once known as Gross's Stop to build an identity of itself as the town of Lyman. In 1955, all the homes owned by the mill were sold to the families as the mill reduced their financial footprint in the new town. The M. Lowenstein and Sons Corporation began their journey in the 1890s in New York City, and throughout the years began to acquire numerous textile companies and their locations. In that same year, the mill again changed ownership to M. Lowenstein and Sons. It was during this time in Lyman history when the town's government was established with Mr. John N. Becknell being elected the town's first mayor. It was M. Lowenstein that helped pioneer the wastewater project for the town at the time. Although the mill had changed ownership, it still continued to employ Lyman residents, and by 1977 to 78, it reached 1 million yards of textile production per day, from 1 million a week to 1 million a day in 43 years. The M. Lowenstein Corporation was the area's biggest employer. In 1966, the town purchased a wastewater plant from the mill and placed the condition that the mill will use and maintain most of it. In 1986, Spring Industries acquired the M. Lowenstein & Sons Corporation after it had undergone major financial strains, and Spring Industries doing business as the Lyman Printing and Finishing Company. It completed its full acquisition of the Lowenstein Corporation and all its mills throughout the entire country. The Lyman Printing and Finishing announced that they would be cutting all but 40 jobs. This would become a precursor of what would then happen 5 years later in 2005. The doors of the mill officially closed. The small farm town known as Grocer's Stop went from that small farm town to a prospering mill community and largest employee in the area, to now stopping all operations. From 1924 to 2005 was 81 years of building, living life, and enjoying every moment of it. Within those 81 years, annual payroll reached $20 million and 2,400 employees earned that salary in a 2.75 million square foot building, distributing millions of yards of fabric throughout the country. In 2005, the census showed 2,863, which would indicate that all about 400 people were working at the mill at the time. The end of an era and essentially a generation. This is the history of Lyman.